Process Scripts Part 2. In the last issue, we pointed out the fact that life scripts run along 6 different tracks or patterns. These process scripts were 1. Until, 2. After, 3. Never, 4. Always, 5. Almost, 6. Open-ended. We covered the first 3 process scripts, so in this edition we will cover the final 3 and then move on to the concept of drivers, or what psychologically drives a person to live according to the script he or she lives by. The next process script is always. A person who lives by this script sees the conditions of life as inevitable. He says to himself, "Why does this always happen to me?" Or he could say, "It doesn't matter what I do." Fill in the negative result. This process script, according to Byrne, is summarized by the Greek goddess Arachne, who was foolish enough to challenge the goddess Minerva to an embroidery contest. Minerva summarily changed Arachne into a spider where she had to spin webs for all eternity. Psychologically speaking, many people fall into the same process script, but whereas Arachne didn't have a choice but to spin webs for eternity, people with this process script do. From a transactional analysis perspective, it doesn't matter whether people fall into this script because of the influence of an overly critical parent, a parent who is impossible to please, or whether it was brought about by a chain of negative circumstances. The genesis of this script remains not because of its inevitability. Unlike Arachne, people have not been permanently changed into spiders whereby they have to spend the rest of their lives weaving and wanting to get back to the way they were. Becoming the free child is still possible, but not as long as the adaptive child mentality is allowed to dictate reality. Unlike the myth, the Arachnes of the world only continue to weave as long as they see themselves as spiders. The next process script is almost. This script is analogous to the character Sisyphus, who was condemned by the Greek gods to eternally push a huge rock up a hill. Every time he got close to the top, he would invariably lose his grip and the rock would roll back down the hill, so the cycle of futility continues. According to Stewart and Joins, TA specialist Tabby Collar sees 2 types of people with this script. The first has already been described. The second type reaches the top, doesn't realize it, or doesn't take satisfaction from it, and looks for a new hill to push the rock up. And here we'll deal with the first type. Again, from a TA perspective, a person with this process script may be acting from an adaptive child that wants to not outshine his parents, friends, or other social group. Most likely this person has his or her achievement thermometer set too low so that attaining higher levels of achievement outstrips where he or she sees him or herself conceptually. And of course, there are many different causes for this. In short, though, the critical parent has set the boundaries on how far this person is allowed to metaphorically go, or even literally go, for that matter. In a certain sense, it's like a dog who is only as free as the length of its leash. The key for a person with this type of process script is to realize that it is okay to unhook the metaphorical leash holding him or her back from freedom. Here's the kicker though, most people look for an outside agent to unhook them, but they are really chained by their own self-concept, the adaptive child who needs approval from the critical parent to make a move. Here's the point though, the critical parent is not going to change its mind. What happened in the past will never change. The only thing that can change is for the adaptive child to consult its adult and finally realize it has options to unleash itself. The next process script is open-ended. According to Stewart and Joins, this script manifests itself in the phrase, "Once I get to a certain point in time, I won't know what to do with myself." This is typical for many mothers suffering from an empty nest syndrome. Stewart and Joins state that this is like a script for a play without the remaining pages or climax missing. Byrne thought of this script like the characters of Philemon and Bacchus, who welcomed Greek gods into their home when others wouldn't. The gods caused them to become two trees with their branches intertwined, standing next to each other forever. The problem was there was no ability for them to do anything else. They were trapped and couldn't personally write the next chapter of their lives. From a transactional analysis perspective, people who live according to open-ended scripts have fused their identities to a particular role. They cannot see themselves apart from this role. When the role is gone, they no longer know who they are. Now, this does not necessarily stem from what typically happens when an adaptive child ego state is formed because of the influence of the critical parent, like we talked about previously. This is, however, adaptive child behavior because in this case, the child of the individual believes itself to be the role it performs to such an extent that it gives up being the free child or self-determined. The key then, like we talked about earlier in previous videos, is to never limit one's self-image by one's roles. Keep them separate, which most people cannot do. And we covered this quite extensively in the video Sandler Training IR Theory, Identity Role Theory. The free child is not determined by roles and role performance. This child has a high self-image and looks for other mountains to climb worthy of that image. In the next issue, we will cover the transactional analysis concept of drivers. These form the impetus for the various process scripts.